time for the Straight Up Wrestling Show.
What's up, everybody? It's HBT with Straight Up Wrestling Show. Guys, I am here live, man. I am here live to talk about something that happened 37 years ago today. And yes, it's getting late, so today is almost over here on the East Coast in the United States. Pretty much, we're like 11 minutes away from that. But, man, I'm going to talk about something that happened, 37 years ago. Barry Windham. Hey, when Barry Windham joined the Four Horsemen. So I'm going to talk about that. So we're going to talk about that. And like I said, it's about 11 minutes till the night's over with. But I'm going to go over a little over that time. Right now, it's storming here in my hometown. So might be a little unstable as far as my internet connection. I am not sure. But right now, man, we are live and we are in effect. And I'm going to talk about, man, my favorite group, my favorite version of the group, the Four Horsemen. When Barry Windham was in that group, man, I mean, in my opinion, that was the strongest that the Four Horsemen ever been when Barry Windham was with the Four Horsemen. And I'm talking about Rick, Arn Tully, and Barry Windham. That was the strongest version of the Four Horsemen. Now, it started off with Ole Anderson, and a lot of people, that was the original. Ole Anderson, Arn Anderson. What's up, Scott Larson, my man, Scott? Yeah, man, 37 years ago, I was 17, about to graduate high school. Yeah, woo. Whoa, long time ago, man. Yeah, I was 20 years old, about to turn 21. But yeah, great time, no doubt, Scott Larson, great time. But yes, man, that right there, that was one of the greatest. You talking about angles, and I was talking to Christopher Burton a little bit earlier. But memory, that's one of the most memorable things ever for me as far as in wrestling is when Barry Windham turned heel. One thing about Barry Windham was a Ricky Steamboat type guy. You never would have thought that Barry Windham would have turned. Barry Windham was such a face, man. It was incredible. I mean, he was such a good guy. And, of course, we wasn't calling them faces back then. It was good guys and bad guys. But he was such a good guy. You never would have thought that would have happened, You got to go back and look at what was happening that led up to it. Ole Anderson was part of the Four Horsemen, and for a year and about 6 months, Ole Anderson, between 1985 and 1986, so that was like 16 months. Ole Anderson and the Horsemen was doing their thing. And then Ole Anderson got into a shouting match with Tully Blanchard about his son. Now, this thing was really happening for real. But, they wrote it into the storyline, and, pretty much they kicked him out because Ole was going down to watch his son in tournaments. I think he was wrestling in tournaments down in Georgia. And so, hey, they didn't like that. So Ole ended up getting kicked out. And at that time, the Four Horsemen was already rolling with an associate of the Four Horsemen, a guy who used to hang out with him, pretty much a pal, a buddy. And they was calling him an associate of the Four Horsemen. That was Lex Luger. So Lex Luger was hanging around the Four Horsemen. Lex Luger, new to the business, hadn't been in the business maybe a few years at that time. I think he started in around 84, 85. So Lex Luger was basically hadn't been in the business that long, and he was pretty much hanging out with the Four Horsemen. So they called him an associate of the Four Horsemen. But believe me, he was 100% in on it when they jumped Ole Anderson and Lex Luger. Hey, he took his shot. You have one chance, like the song Eminem said, if you got one shot, one chance, one shot, would you take it? And I tell you what, Lex Luger, he was in on it when they jumped Ole Anderson in the locker room. And hey, Lex got in his punches. He got in his, he pretty much was uppercutting, getting little jabs in the stomach, doing whatever he could to be a part of that. And he became a full-fledged member of the Four Horsemen. Then a little bit later on, Lex Luger, he was with him for a while. in 86 coming, what, not 86, I say, yeah, 86. I don't think he was in there. I don't even think he was with him for a year. But Lex Luger, man, doing the Great American Bash run, the Great American Bash tour, when they was going from city to city to city to city, you had Arn and Tully and sometimes Lex. I mean, you had different people in the Horseman, and I think Ric Flair even won one that was going over in the Great American at the Great American Bash in those Bunkhouse Stampede matches, which was great matches where you had a lot of different guys in there. You had all the Horsemen in there. You maybe had the Road Warriors in there. You had you had the Road Warriors in there, and then you had other people that like Ron Garvin and Jimmy Garvin, and you had other people that was enemies of the Four Horsemen that was wanting to get rid of the Four Horsemen. So Four Horsemen was battling a lot of different people. It wasn't just them. Midnight Express was in these Bunkhouse Stampedes, the Rock and Roll Express, a lot of different people, all the top names pretty much at one point in time in 1986 was in these Bunkhouse Stampedes, which was great matchups. Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA. I think Magnum was hurt at that time, so definitely wasn't Magnum. But you had Dusty Rhodes participating in these things, teaming up with the Road Warriors and Nikita Koloff. So you had a lot of great guys in this Bunkhouse Stampede. And like I said, each one of the Horseman members had a victory in the Bunkhouse Stampede. And J.J. Dillon was participating in these Bunkhouse Stampedes. And J.J. Dillon, he never had won one. He always was the odd man out as far as the Horsemen. All of the other Horsemen had won a Bunkhouse Stampede. And he told them, if we ever get a chance to where we're all left in there, would you guys just step out so I can, win it, so I can win it and go down in the record books. And so, hey, one night, I think it was I'm not sure if that was Baltimore, Maryland or whatever, one night at the Bunkhouse Stampede, all the Horsemen was left in there. You had, Rick wasn't there. Rick wasn't in there because I think Rick had a world title defense that night, maybe against Ronnie Garvin or somebody, or was it Dusty Rhodes? I can't remember. But the last few that was in the ring, where you had Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, and J.J. Dillon, and Lex Luger. So it's those four. One member missing. That was the Nature Boy Ric Flair, which, like I said, he wrestled later on that night, later on that evening. But you had those four in the ring. And Lex Luger, he decided he wasn't going to step over. You had Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. They stepped over the ring so JJ could get that win. But you had one guy, one dissension in the group, and that was Lex Luger. Lex Luger said, and they was telling him, hey, come on, Lex, get out. And Lex said, leave me alone. You telling Arn and Tully, leave him alone. He'll make the best decision. He'll make the right decision. And, JJ was in there, he was in there with Lex. Come on, Lex, I need this. I go down in the record books. You guys all have gotten one. I want one. Lex decided, hey, I'm not going to do that. So he grabbed JJ. He threw him out. And, of course, you know what happened after that. You had Tully come in. Lex picked Tully up and hit him with a slam. Was beating down Tully and had him in the torture rack. But then you had Arn Anderson come in and pretty much, or was it Arn Anderson he got in the torture rack? It was one of the two. But then next thing you know, one of them come in with, and hit Lex right in the back of the knee. And I'm pretty sure that was Tully Blanchard. It was Arn Anderson who was in the torture rack because, the enforcer, he was the one, he never liked Lex. It seemed like he was kind of like iffy on Lex anyway, but he was the first one in there when Lex had attacked JJ. Arn was the first one in there. So he started beating Arn down and, like I said, got him in the torture rack. But to make a long story short, he went on after this and he ended up teaming up with Barry Windham, which they was friends before. They was already friends before that he had really joined up with the Horsemen. But he joined up with Barry Windham and they won the NWA World Tag Team Championships. And they was a good tag team. Barry Windham and Lex Luger was a great tag team. And, JJ, I guess he started talking to Barry. And the thing about Barry Windham had like 3 matches already that he had took Ric Flair to a time limit draw. 3 90-minute time limit draws. 3, believe me, guys. In 1986, early 1986, or was it 85, he took Ric Flair to 3 90-minute draws. And so Barry Windham was one of the biggest candidates for, he was one of the number 1 competitors for that World Heavyweight Championship, that NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Barry Windham was incredible, man. He was a great wrestler, 100%. So Lex Luger ended up teaming with Barry Windham, which is a good decision. They won the NWA World Heavyweight Championships. And, they was going on for a while. And at this time, all the fans across the Carolinas, Virginia, wherever the NWA used to go, they used to go to the Meadowlands in New Jersey. They used to go, you'd go out to Buffalo, New York. That's, those some places that they used to go to. Philadelphia, they was popular in Chicago. All the fans all across the country, man, they was doing that. Four Horsemen didn't have a 4th member. They didn't. And so everybody was just, down with the 4 Horsemen, the fans cheering and laughing. And it was like, where are you going to get another Horseman? Where are you going to get another Horseman? Ric Flair started, taunting everybody, saying, we're going to get another Horseman. We're going to get another Horseman. And so they started naming, they said Barry Windham was going to be the 4th Horseman. And everybody was just laughing. Barry didn't say nothing for about a few weeks. They said Barry Windham, this thing went on for a few weeks, and they kept saying, and J.J. Dillon, Ric Flair, and they was all saying Barry Windham. It was just J.J. and Rick. Arn and Tully just wasn't really saying anything, just in the background, doing their little thing, being cool. But they kept saying that Barry Windham was going to be the 4th Horseman. And Barry Windham finally came out. And one week he got on the mic, he said, that was the most delusional statement that Ric Flair could ever make. What in the world are they talking about? He said, that's the dumbest thing they ever said. He said, because there's no way in the world he would ever be a Horseman. And like I said, Barry Windham was the ultimate baby face, man. Ultimate good guy. Just, he's another Ricky Steamboat. I never would have thought this man would turn. And then, a couple weeks after that, they're defending the titles. Barry Windham and Lex Luger defending their NWA World Tag Team Championships against the Horsemen, against not Ole Anderson, but Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. And I can't remember, but they knocked Lex Luger off. I think Tully came around and pretty much knocked Lex off of the ring apron, and he hit his head or something like that, and he hit his head on, I think, the metal pole, and he was knocked out. Basically, he was just out. And man, let me get my memory correct. So Barry was in there, man. He was just fighting. He's fighting both Horsemen. Tully and Arn coming in there, and of course, Barry holding his own. Barry goes over. He goes over to try to tag. No, Lex not there. But guess who's there? J.J. Dillon. And J.J. Dillon is telling Barry, I told you he wouldn't be there. I told you he wouldn't be there. And, Jim Ross and all of them, they were saying, hey, what in the world's going on? Why in the world is J.J. talking to Lex? And, Barry, he's fighting him off. And, Barry hitting his patented moves to get away from him. He's going over there to tag him again. And, he's looking around. What's going on? Lex is nowhere to be found. And JJ is getting in his sight. It just basically where, Barry couldn't see everything that was going on. He probably could have looked over and saw that Lex Luger was out, that, somebody had knocked him out. He said, I kept telling you, kid. I kept telling you he wasn't going to be there. He wasn't going to be there. And he's like, why in the world is JJ continued to talk to Barry? And hey, finally, Lex Luger got up enough strength, man. He crawled over, got onto the ring apron, and he was just leaning on the ring. And Barry in there just fighting for his life, man, fighting for survival, fighting off 2 of the best wrestlers in the world at that time. 2 of the best wrestlers in the world, probably one of the best tag teams, one of the top 5 tag teams to ever lace the boots up. And those guys, rough, rugged, and Barry Windham in there holding his own and made it back over to tagged Lex Luger. Lex just leaned out. He just, Barry just grabbed his hand and just, started flapping it down and made him tag in. And, and Lex was just trying to look like he was trying to explain to him, but he was basically knocked out. Barry pulled this guy over the top rope, pulled him in the ring, picked him up, power slammed the guy. And, and Arn Anderson over there, he just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What's going on? He like, oh my gosh. And, and Barry just, picking him up, just basically just, talking to him, like giving him little, taps. Looked like he was slapping him. I can't remember exactly what happened. Got to go back and check that out. But yeah, Barry was just pissed off that Lex wasn't there. And he just left him in that ring, man, and let, he walked out, let Arn Anderson pin him. And I think it was Arn Anderson who pinned him, but he walked out and, they followed him. JJ followed him. And then you had the other members of the Horsemen, they followed him. And Barry, the fans were like, what's going on? What's going on? They could not believe that Barry had switched sides. And Barry, he put up that Four Horsemen, had that little grin on his face. And that was the switch, man. He switched over. Barry Windham was now a member of the Four Horsemen. And the next week, when Barry Windham came onto TV, he came on the TV, WTBS Superstation at 6:05. And they was talking to Barry Windham, talking to all the guys, man. Pretty much Barry Windham, J.J. Dillon, Arn Anderson, Tully, Ric Flair. What was your favorite version of the Four Horsemen, Scott? The one that I'm talking about, Barry Windham, when Barry Windham was part of them, when it was Arn, Tully, Barry, and Rick with J.J. Dillon. That was my favorite version of the Four Horsemen. They had all the titles. They were just great, man. You had obviously everybody, especially in the NWA, looked at Ric Flair, mostly the wrestling world in general, even though you had the WWE World Heavyweight Champion, Hulk Hogan. You had over in the AWA, I think Stan Hansen had it at that time. Either Stan Hansen or Rick Martel. I think it was Stan Hansen. But universally accepted was the Nature Boy. Ric Flair was the World's Heavyweight Champion, was the best champion, was the biggest champion in the world. Even though Hogan was the most popular, Ric Flair still was that epitome of world champions. And you had, the NWA World Tag Team Championships, which was held by, before, Barry up and turned on Lex, it was held by them. But then you had Arn and Tully at that time. They took those titles, and Barry Windham ended up being the United States Heavyweight Champion, and that was number 1 to the NWA champion. And that, that one thing about that title, one thing about that United States Championship, it was very, very important. They was always the number 1 contender, always battling the world champion. Now, when Barry had it, of course, he was in the Horseman, so he didn't get to wrestle Ric Flair for the world title at that time. And that's the first time I ever seen that, because like I said, over the years, you go all the way back to the 70s, to the foundation of that title, as far as in Jim Crockett Promotions, it was always the number 1, the number 1 contender shot. Even if you go back to Dory Funk Jr., Jack Briscoe, when you had Paul Jones who wore the title, who had Chief Wahoo McDaniel wore the title, Black Jack Mulligan wore the title. They was always, every time Jack Briscoe came through the territory, he had to defend it against that United States champion first before anything. Anytime Harley Race come through the Mid-Atlantic championship area, rather Ric Flair had it, Ricky Steamboat had it, Chief Wahoo McDaniel had it, even when Roddy Piper had it, Harley Race had to defend that World Heavyweight Championship against one of those guys who had that United States championship. Of course, the WWE has that title. The lineage of that title goes back to Jim Crockett Promotions. WWE has that title right now, and they have never elevated it to that status. They have not one time. Now, you've had some great guys in the WWE who's had that United States Championship, but if you go back to the lineage of it, I mean, the greatest United States Heavyweight Champion, in my opinion, was Ricky Steamboat. And then I would say Ric Flair number 2, and I say Blackjack Mulligan number 3, and number 4 was Chief Wahome Daniel. The things that they did for that United States heavyweight championship was incredible, and it was the biggest championship in Jim Crockett for a long time until Jim Crockett got the main hold onto the World Heavyweight Championship, because before that it was mainly defended territory to territory, the NWA from those multiple territories. But yeah, that United States Championship, it even was so strong because you had other territories who had a version of the United States Championship. They basically disbanded that. The NWA disbanded those titles, and Crockett's version of the United States Championship became the United States Championship. It was the one and only. But Barry Windham was a great United States champion. And when it boils down to it, I have to say Barry Windham I'll take a lot of things back. Barry Windham probably, if not the greatest, he's probably number 2 after Ricky Steamboat, as far as the United States heavyweight champion. Now, it's still it is a debate between Steamboat and Ric Flair, but I'm going to go and say Flair is number 3, and I'm going through it. I'm throwing Ricky Steamboat number 1, Barry Windham number 2. And then I got to say Blackjack Mulligan, Barry's dad, number 4. He was an outstanding United States champion. And then I say number 5 was Chief Wahome Daniel. And then Roddy Piper at number 6. Roddy Piper was a great NWA, United States NWA champion. He was outstanding. But Barry Windham, man, in the Horseman, like I said, they had all the titles. Barry Windham won the United States championship. And, he was arguably, him and Ric Flair was 1 and 2. At that time, as far as skill in wrestling, I didn't see many people better than Barry Windham. There was a few that was better than him, but overall, as far as everything inside of a ring, he probably was the most talented. Maybe next to Flair, he was actually more talented as a wrestler than Flair. But I'm talking about somebody, man, who had all the scientific skill. And he may have learned a lot of that from Mike Rotundo, who was dating a sister or married to a sister at that time. I don't know but he might have learned a lot of that from Mike Rotundo, because this guy could wrestle technically, as a technical wrestler against anybody, man. He was so good at that. But he could brawl with the best of them. Barry Windham was kind of like his dad. He could brawl with anybody, big, tall Texan, and look good with everything that he did. Now, one thing about it is at his first run with the Horseman was only 11 months, between 1986 and 1987. Then he left. His contract expired, and he went to the WWE, him and Mike Rotundo, his brother-in-law. So he went there, and they became, that tag team that Lou Albano was, he pretty much managed them. I did not like it because Barry Windham, he was the quintessential NWA wrestler, man. He was just outstanding. He's just a great wrestler. But yes, his inclusion in the Four Horsemen is the best I've ever seen. Lex Luger was a pretty good horseman. Of course, Ole Anderson was, but Ole at that time when Ole was running with the Horsemen, Ole was past his prime. Even though he was still great, Ole was past his prime. And Ole and Arn was a great tag team, but nowhere near as good as him and his brothers. I mean, him and Gene Anderson. Gene Anderson, Ole Anderson, still, in my opinion, the best the best tag team that I ever seen. I know a lot of people want to throw out the Road Warriors and say the Road Warriors are the best. I watched the Road Warriors. I watched their whole career. No. They cannot, they wasn't as good as the Anderson brothers. Rick and Scott Steiner, if they would stay together a little bit longer, maybe. Those guys didn't stay together long enough. But if they would stay together a little bit longer, they probably could have went down as the greatest. They're my second as far as on my list of tag teams. They are ranked number 2. And you have the Anderson brothers. I have them ranked number 1. But the Road Warriors, man, they was an incredible tag team. Very, very good tag team. But man, that team of Arn and Tully, something special. Not Arn and Tully, but Arn and Gene, they was special, guys. They had it all. But like I said, Barry Windham, just a serious superstar. And he came back and won that United States Championship. He was, I think, was second run. No, it was the first run. And you had Tony Schiavone, who tried to start something. I'll never forget that. Tony Schiavone, they were talking about the number 1 contender doing these Great American Bashes because Ric Flair had went through all the competition. He had beat Dusty Rhodes. He had beat Hulk. He had beat Ricky Morton. He had beat Ronnie Garvin. Pretty much Nikita Koloff. Ric Flair pretty much dominated everybody. He was just running through the competition. And was he having the Horseman out there coming and attacking people? No. Ric Flair, that's 17 nights, man. 17 out of 19 nights, Ric Flair just dominated. Or was it 17 out of 21? Something like that. But Ric Flair dominated that run. He proved that, hey, he was the man straight up. Nobody could touch him. And they was talking about who's next. Who's the number one contender? Ric Flair had went through everybody, kind of like what Roman Reigns was saying when Roman Reigns said he had smashed everybody. Ric Flair had smashed everybody. And Tony Schiavone, he was looking at Barry Windham one day. And Rick was like, what are you trying to do? Rick was because Barry was looking at Rick, and Barry had the United States Championship, and he was with the Horseman. And at that time, I'm thinking Barry Windham is going to turn, because Barry Windham, like I said, Barry Windham in 84, 85, he had some wars with Ric Flair, and they always came out to a draw. And not to mention those 3 90-minute matches that Ric Flair and Barry Windham had. 90 minutes, you talking about Iron Man matches, those 3 were. And they went at it back and forth. But Barry Windham, if anybody could beat Barry Windham, if anybody could beat Ric Flair in 1986 and 1987, it was Barry Windham. It was Barry Windham. Of course, Dusty Rhodes could beat him. Dusty Rhodes could beat him at any time when it boils down to it. Dusty's just that good. But outside of that, I don't see anybody else that was on the NWA roster. I don't see anybody else in the world of professional wrestling that could, legitimately take out the Nature Boy Ric Flair. Even though Hulk Hogan, like I say, as popular as he was, if you have a legitimate match and you match those guys up skill-wise against each other, Ric Flair is going to come out on top all the time. But Barry Windham was one of those guys who could match Ric Flair skill for skill, actually better than Ric Flair when it boils down to it. It's just Ric was so smart as a wrestler. He was able to hold off people like Barry Windham when Barry was challenging them. But Barry was not challenging them no more, because Barry was part of the Four Horsemen. He was part of that group. And, man, he just made them stronger. That was the strongest version of the Horsemen. It just was. When you have these guys gunnering, when those guys gunnered, they pretty much conquered all the titles, the top titles. In Jim Crockett Promotions and the NWA, they had the biggest titles. Did I like that? At first I did, but then I was like, man, I don't know if I want this group to have all the top titles, but it's not much you could do. Who was going to beat Barry Windham for that United States Championship? Nobody was going to take that world title away from Ric Flair. Anytime he lost it, he got it right back. Now, the World Tag Team Champions, I can look at that and say, hey, maybe that was the weak link when you had Arn and Tully, but they really wasn't a weak link. But you had so many great tag teams back then. The Road Warriors, they was, those guys was running around. You had Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev. You had let's say Mark Youngblood and Chief Wahoo McDaniel. You had the Rock and Roll Express had came in. You had the Midnight Express. You had so many, you had the Fabulous Ones who had came in. You had so many great tag teams. Ron Bass and Black Bart. It just so many great tag teams. That was a challenge. The Mass Superstar 1 and 2. But that's like 7 teams I just named off. But all these teams was a problem to anybody that held those World Tag Team Championships. And then after a while, you had around that time, I think that's when Jim Crockett Promotions came up with the United States Championship, because it was just so many tag teams, and they was all vying for that one title. And then, of course, you had the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Championships, and they had disbanded those, the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Championship. So you had 3 titles at one time, but yeah, they had just around that time, they was getting rid of the Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Championships. But, man, it was incredible. It just really was, as far as Barry Windham's run with the Four Horsemen. Barry Windham, he feuded with Lex Luger at that time. He had some defenses against Ronnie Garvin, which was outstanding. Jimmy Garvin. He had a lot of great title defenses, against people. Even, he defended against Dusty Rhodes at that time. he was defending against Nikita Koloff. Barry Windham was just, man, he was outstanding. He was outstanding, 100%. But yeah, that's all I wanted to do, get on and talk a little bit about, man, hey, Barry Windham, like I say, 37 years ago to this day, until the day that just passed, Barry Windham was part of the Four Horsemen. That's when he joined the Four Horsemen. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my favorite wrestler in the Four Horsemen outside of Ric Flair, and my favorite version of the Four Horsemen was with Barry. When Barry was part of the Four Horsemen, hey, man, you cannot beat that faction. To me, that's the greatest faction ever. Now, only thing I can really say that would have rivaled it, yeah, I mean, there's a couple other ones. I did like the Dangerous Alliance. I like what Paul Heyman, Paul E. Dangerously did way back in the day. He had a very good group that was close to what the Horsemen had. The Varsity Club, that was a great group. Those two factions was outstanding. The NWO, if it would have just been Kevin Nash, it would have been Kevin Nash. It would have been Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Hulk Hogan. They would have added one more member. That may have rivaled the Horsemen. Not as sneaky as the Horsemen. Not saying any of those guys could wrestle better than the Horsemen, but they was the rulers. They was the top guys in the business at that time, and they ruled with power, and they could do a lot of things. Maybe it was because of their size. So that is a group that I would say that could have rivaled what the Horsemen brought to the table. But, they decided to add a whole bunch of other people with the Horsemen. I mean, not with the Horsemen, but with the outsiders. But the outsiders could have went down as one of those teams that you could say, hey, they right up there with the Horsemen. But this group right here with Barry Windham, not a better Horseman group. And a lot of people agree with me on that. A lot. I think most of them would say Ole Anderson because he's the original. They love that. He's the original. But once again, I'm going to say Ole Anderson was not at his peak, man. He was not the same dude that I had grew up with. But he still was really good. Kind of that tag team kind of annoyed me a little bit because I looked at Arn as this young lion, well and just ready to go, and reminded me of old Ole Anderson. But Ole Anderson was just not that he was going through the emotions. He was putting in a lot of work, but he just wasn't as efficient. Let me think of somebody else who was older at that time that's still wrestling. Ray the Crippler Stevens. Ray Stevens. He wasn't a Ray Stevens. He, like I say, he was just good, but not good enough to be holding World Tag Team Championships. And I think they had the National Tag Team Championships. Ole and Arn. But guys, I appreciate everybody coming in. If you're over on Facebook, hit that like, share, join. If you're on YouTube, man, or Twitch, hit that like, share, tweet, like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, ding, 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 so you know we're on like times like these. And if you're over on X, guys, formerly known as Twitter, hit that like, share, tweet, and retweet, and follow the Straight Up Wrestling Show. Appreciate each and every one of you guys coming in here, ladies and gentlemen. But I am very tired, and I need to take a shower, take a bath, and pretty much get myself in bed because tomorrow morning I have got to get my wife to the hospital. She have a knee replacement surgery. So I talk to each and every one of you a little bit later. Stay straight up. Peace.